Welcome to Mission Majjhima.
Ajahn.
So Ajahn, tell us about Majjhima Nikaya 39, the Mahā Assapura Sutta.
So this is really one of my favorite suttas in the whole canon. It gives one of the most succinct and clear elaborations of the gradual training that the Buddha gave, framed in terms of these affirmations that one can practice oneself, put in terms of quotes. So the Buddha begins by saying, samanas, samanas, that's what people call you. And when people ask, what are you? You say, I'm a samana. Samana is the Pali for a renunciant. I'm a practitioner. So that being your designation, that being what you say you are, you should practice those things that make one a samana, that make one a Brahmin, a religious seeker, so that your designations may be accurate. Thus should you train yourselves. So all that's in quotes. We will be ones who practice those qualities that make one a samana. And I think this samana here really can be expanded if you're conceiving of yourself as a Buddhist or even as just a practitioner. These are the parts of the gradual training which all of us should practice. It's not just if you're a monk or a nun. We all need to be practicing these things. And then the Buddha gives this gradual training, which is found in this cool little book here. Thus you should train yourselves. The whole thing is available online. And it is every time in the canon when the Buddha says, thus should you train yourselves. And it's fixed around the framework found in here. So here we have the Buddha first teaching about hiri and ottappa, or conscience and fear of wrongdoing. The Buddha says, you should train yourself thus. And then, quote, we will be ones who are possessed of hiri and ottappa, of conscience and fear of wrongdoing. Thus you should train yourselves. And so that's the training. But then the Buddha says, being possessed thus of hiri and ottappa, you might think, this much is enough, this much is okay. There's no more left to do. And the Buddha says, I exhort you, don't give up when there's still more to do. So this is a continuing thread through the sutta, is that don't give up. Don't just settle for less than the highest, less than deeper and deeper peace, subtler and subtler, and more refined and less harmful states of happiness. The next training is with bodily purity. So we will train ourselves thus you should train yourselves. We will be possessed of purity of body, so not killing, not stealing, not committing sexual misconduct. And again, the Buddha says, you may think, thus, this much is enough, this much is okay, we've done what we can do. And one exalts oneself and disparages others. This is another thread where, having practiced to some extent, you exalt yourself. I'm great because I'm not killing, etc. Other people kill, therefore I can subtly or not so subtly look down on them. Very point. Ethics in a Buddhist sense, whether it's purity of speech or purity of body, needs to come along with this not exalting oneself, with an egolessness. We practice these, but we're not attached to them. We don't look down on others. The next step is training in speech. We'll be ones who are purified of speech. We're ones who are training in purity of mind, purity of livelihood, sense restraint, moderation in eating, in which he gives this training, which in monasteries we recite every day before the meal, sometimes 3 times a day, before we eat, while we're eating we think it, and then afterwards, wisely reflecting, we use alms food not for fun, not for pleasure, not for fattening, not for beautification, only for the maintenance and nourishment of this body, for keeping it healthy, for helping with the holy life, thinking thus, I will allay hunger without overeating, so that I may continue to live blamelessly and at ease. Then training in wakefulness. After devotion to wakefulness, you have this training in habitual mindfulness loop, where one has mindfulness, clear comprehension, or alertness, going, coming back, extending their limb, pulling it back, sitting, standing, walking, lying down, speaking and remaining silent. So then the Buddha goes into seclusion, and you cleanse the mind from the 5 hindrances, and he gives 5 similes for those, which are fascinating, we can go into later. Then he goes into training in the jhanas, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th jhana, and giving beautiful similes for each of those. And then from that, one recollects one's past lives, sees beings faring on according to their karma, and then realizes the Four Noble Truths. And there's another beautiful simile there, and we can go into all of those similes And that's the full path from training in hearing Ottappa to realizing the Four Noble Truths and awakening. Ajahn, so what would you like to draw up from the sutta?
I think the similes are worth going into because they are found elsewhere, but they are, for me, there's a quality to some of the similes that seem to come from the Buddha's mind and that are just the depth and how they serve as this continual fount of wisdom is kind of amazing to me. And the deeper you go, the more you see. So with the hindrances, he says that the first hindrance of sensual desire is like being in debt. And you can see this when you give your kind of heart or mind to an external sensory object, you're going into debt, you're basically giving that part of yourself a little bit away. And you know this when something fades or the sensory experience dissipates, there's a sense of kind of emptiness and loss. And I think the simile is even better because often to repay or ameliorate that sense of loss after, we take out another loan, an even bigger loan, and the interest just compounds. We go to another sensual stimulus, and it's just a never-ending cycle of us drinking salt water to satiate our thirst. He compares anger to an illness, ill will to an illness, sick, where one does not enjoy one's food. And anger feels like an illness. It makes one weak, it makes one ugly, it's just painful. He compares sloth and torpor to being in prison, which is somewhat self-explanatory. He compares restlessness and remorse to being enslaved and not able to go where one wants or do what one wants and having to obey the demands of another master. And the sense that when we're kind of possessed by that energy, we have no control over what we do. We just have to act, and just the fraught nature of that relationship with our energies. And then the fifth being one is overcome by doubt. And that's a caravan traveling through kind of bandit-ridden wilderness, not sure if they'll make it. And then when the five hindrances are gone, one regards it as freedom from debt, freedom from illness, freedom from prison, freedom from slavery, safe passage. And one abides glad, and the mind becomes concentrated. Those are just such good similes. And there's more to go into, and especially the images the Buddha gives for jhana. And just briefly, the first jhana being a bathman's apprentice kneading water into a ball of path powder such that no part of it is unpermeated with the water. Even so, a practitioner permeates and pervades their body with the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. And in that analogy, the water is basically sukha, ease, which is one of the enlightenment or the jhana factors. And the movement of that water is piti, rapture, as it soaks in. The two hands are vitakka vichara, directed thought and evaluation, how we kind of move through the body with very active perceptions often, or at least some intention in that first jhana, according to the texts. The second jhana is a lake with a fount of cool water from below, and one can see that as the fact that at that point the piti, the refreshment, the rapture, kind of rises on its own. You don't have to be kneading it in. The third jhana, the analogy is lotus is immersed in cool water, and at that point the piti, the rapture, is faded. You're just left with sukha, ease, happiness, which is still water. And then the fourth simile being a person blanketed with a clean white cloth, which is the purity of mindfulness. So beautiful similes meant to catalyze experience and clarify the more traditional definitions of the jhanas, but there's so much more you can say about them, but really kind of brilliant moments, I think, of genius. So, Ajahn, what else would you bring out in this discourse?
Yeah, no, just continue with those similes. Then the Buddha, recollection of past lives, as if seeing someone go from one village to the next and then coming back and seeing, when I was there, I stood like this and I spoke like this, etc. And then coming back, that's the simile for recollecting past lives, and then recollecting how beings are the owners of their kammas, as if seeing two houses and then seeing beings going from one to the other. And then the simile for full awakening, realizing the Four Noble Truths, is if one is in a mountain and sees this very clear, limpid pool and can see the bottom of the pool because everything is so clear. That's awakening. And just pointing out that all of these are trainings. Thus should you train yourself.
And Ajahn was very humble, but he actually compiled that book, Thus You Should Train Yourself. So thank you for that, Ajahn. What was the word of the week, Ajahn?
The word of the week is hiri otapa. So it's actually two terms, hiri and otapa, conscience, fear of wrongdoing, lots of different translations, wholesome or intelligent conscience. So
we'll see you all next week for Majjhima Nikaya 40, and some of you will see in a second on Zoom.
Right.
Ajahn.